You're listening to Style as Identity.
Yes, we're your hosts. I'm Frankie Ikwuazom.
And I'm Lola Catero. So, is starting a brand on your vision board?
Or do you just love fashion and want us to talk nerdy to you?
Either way, we got you.
Join us as we get into aspects of the trade that you might not find online. We're uncovering truths from the founders and designers daring to build within their vision and values.
These brands, they're shifting our understanding of the style status quo. And the more time we spend with them, the more we expect from what we wear and the brands that sell them.
So, we're glad you're here.
Let's do this.
We are super happy to be joined by Nyla Hasan, founder and creative director of The Øther. Nyla, you describe The Øther as honoring the complexity of multicultural roots and the stories we all come from. You do this through clothing and storytelling that connects style and cultural identity, often your own. Our conversation today is rooted in this concept of origin and the idea that everything we create comes from our lived experiences that have most shaped who we are. So as a person with backgrounds in multiple cultures, you've embraced the breadth of your identity and created a brand that can help us all to do the same, which is amazing. Origin is not only about where we come from, but also where we live. And we live in our bodies 24/7, have since the moment we joined this planet, yet sometimes we're disconnected from them. You remind us that style can be a powerful way to reforge that connection to our bodies, helping us to reclaim them even after they have physically transformed. So we're just going to sit with that and say, welcome, Nyla.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Frankie and Lola.
We're so happy you're here.
We are.
Nyla, the brand is young, but you're mature. Separating you from the brand, so you've had over 15 years of experience in the industry. Oscar de la Renta, Tory Burch, Tanya Taylor, Ralph Lauren, the list goes on. I want to hear both sides of the coin here. I'm interested, first, what irreplaceable knowledge did that experience give you that brought you to launching this brand? And then on the other side, like, what undeniable faults did it reveal to you that you wanted to challenge and prompted you to like, oh, I've got to start this brand?
So I've been around the block a few times. And I feel like it's funny because
you've been around the avenues, right?
The avenues. Fortunately, I've never worked in the fashion district. I mean, I feel like every person that works in fashion knows that area quite well in Midtown and has like mixed feelings about it. And I do as well. But I think the biggest thing for me was working for such incredible brands was giving me a refined sense of taste. And taste, that comes with time. And I think, and maturity as well. And I think balancing the nuances of proportion and developing a collection and silhouettes within the collection and a story, that all takes time. From every experience I've had in my career, taking that knowledge and refining my own skill set has been a really big part of my own personal growth as a designer. I feel like the faults I could go into, but I think generally speaking, what I had seen throughout my career was just so much overdevelopment, overproduction. But when it came to myself as an individual, as a designer, I felt like there was this big churn of burnout. And I think we see that a lot in the industry. A lot of creative directors of big fashion houses get burnt out and they have very short tenures. And so, you know, recognizing my own creative process and time, I need time to create, and that the industry doesn't necessarily allow for that.
Oh, that's so interesting, because as an outsider hearing about creative directors and their kind of short tenures, I think it's often spun as, oh, they want to go on to their next thing and they want to keep developing their career. But it's rarely talked about as, oh, they burnt out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think also it's like, it's a combination of so many different things. It's like, they're not hitting their numbers. They're burnt out. The pressure is there. There's immense pressure on, you know, these individuals who are at the helm of these like really big positions. And, you know, I feel like great work takes time.
Yeah. Even thinking through like the seasonality of fashion, and people expect if you're a quote unquote mature brand, you're going to come out with new things on a certain cadence. And also, you know, fashion weeks, they're not going to change the schedule for you. So, or for any of us. So, I mean, when you put it like that, we're trained to do things on a certain schedule, but it's like that might not be the natural schedule of the creation or the creativity behind so much of what you do. Yeah, it makes you think if that needs to be reworked.
Yeah, definitely.
So you started talking about this a little bit when you walked us through taste, which I really like. All that knowledge that you acquired over time, how did that impact like what the brand is today, what the Other is? Like you know, you have way broader range of sizing, all the way from 00 to 24, maybe even more. You do moods and collections. How did that knowledge impact some of those decisions that you've made that have really shaped the brand?
Through my last gig that I had, they were developing extended sizing, and that was really new at the time. That was like 5-6 years ago. And for a contemporary brand to go into extended sizing was like kind of a new terrain. And at that time, while I was working there, I was designing special like VIP garments for like Aidy Bryant for the Emmys, and, you know, a few other actresses, and being exposed to the emotional resonance and the magic behind when someone puts on a garment that makes them feel so good and so confident. I think any person of any size can feel that way, and that shouldn't be limited to a certain size. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And so as I was developing the idea for the brand, for the Other, I was like, why would I limit this to a 0 through 12? That's like a very contemporary size range that you see in most major department stores. And it just seems silly because the average American is a size 16. Mm-hmm. So why? And someone who is a 2 or a 22 can love the same dress. So why would I not offer it to both people? And so that was really steeped in my own like beliefs, because everyone should feel like good in their clothing and bring out the best in themselves from within. For developing a collection, I started calling them moods instead of collections. I kind of use them interchangeably, but from the place that I design from is a mood. I am such an emo person. I got that Cancer moon. Yes, I'm into astrology. But yeah, I kind of start with this like feeling and this thought process based off of the feeling, and start developing a collection that comes from like a more conceptual and abstract place. And then from there, like, how does that manifest in physical form? And that's sort of where I felt like, for me, that was different than past brands I've worked for, where there's like a muse, or there's a time period, or there's, you know, a culture or something that they're pulling inspiration from. And from this process of like creating a mood, it's really coming from within.
I like that too, because earlier when you talked about how the industry isn't shaped to allow people time to do things that take time, even the way that you've shifted from collections to moods, you're giving yourself a less confined space to create. Like, a collection makes you feel of something that's very set, and a mood is something that feels almost like something that could grow into something versus a set from the start. So I really like that I can see the ways that you're almost like readjusting the process, and we get to see some of that in the way that you position the brand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hearing about the extended sizing makes me think about how our fit model is, the size of the fit model is so far and away from the average size of the female American in the US. And we are designing for the edge case as opposed to the average case. And think about, okay, in the tech world, when would you ever design for the edge case over here and then disregard the mass consumption? I mean, sure, in fashion, it's like, who is your customer, and all of that comes into play. But I think it's just the standard that we fit towards or like design for is the fit model, as opposed to the total available market that is the average size, which is just something to marinate on. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
Definitely. I mean, for myself, I fit on a size 4 and an 18. And so when I fit on an 18, she happens to be a dear friend of mine. And the first time she tried on our pieces, the amount of emotion that came out, the excitement that came out of like how she felt in the clothes was so validating. understanding that customer and what their needs are and trying to cater towards them just as much as the size 4, like the standard size 4, like fit model is super important. It's super important to me. I feel very passionate about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so obviously, I mean, you're trying to approach this slow and carefully. And, you know, not unlike a lot of emerging brands though, right? I mean, we build for intention. And I'm curious, and you've said yourself, what I'm able to control, I will do so, is manifest in sizing and all that. And I want to know, what is something you aren't able to control? Safe space.
Yeah. So I know, right? So what's funny is like I made this list for myself of like things I can control versus things I cannot control. And the things that I can control, besides like how the product is made, the cadence in which I'm releasing it, and how many items I plan to produce. And those are the things that I'm like, okay, like I got that. The things that I cannot control are delays in manufacturing. And this happens across the board from every single business I've worked for, and including my own business, where it doesn't matter how much you plan in advance, how organized you are, how you think that everything is going to go smoothly to plan, but things come up. And so expecting the unexpected in that regard. So like, for example, this summer, there's monsoon season in India, and one of my factories was flooded and a bunch of our fabric was damaged and destroyed from the flooding. And so having to navigate that was really, I mean, it's, you know, you kind of have to roll with the punches on that front. And they had to
were those made to order pieces so the customers felt the delay in their order?
So for that, thankfully, that was fabric that we didn't need right away. And so we can have it replaced if needed. But that was for a made to order program. It was hand dyed fabric and labor intensive. It's not just bought from the market. You know, it was actually like hand dyed. Another thing that I cannot control, which I feel like, Lola, you can relate to this one, is my bandwidth in relation to my kids. I'm a mom of 2, a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And both my partner and I run the business together, and we've raised our family together, and we're under the same constraints as parents and as business owners. And when they're homesick, our bandwidth is compromised. And so, you know, being able to accept these changes that come up unexpectedly that I have no control over, you know, I just have to figure it out. Like, we problem solve that together. That's definitely challenging for sure.
Yep. I just want to underline that. That's true. Yeah, absolutely. And taking this a little bit to my personal life, yesterday I was in yoga class and the teacher was talking about self-control and the things that we can control and can't control. And it had me thinking about all the things that I can't control, some of which you just mentioned with juggling family stuff. And then it reminded me that we are dynamic, and that if we say yes or no or can't do something, it doesn't mean that we're not necessarily in control. It means that we're flexing into just natural life. And it kind of gave me this permission to feel less bad about something that I can't do, because this is just like a factor of life. And I was like, oh, I feel like self-control needs a rebrand a bit, of like being able to be dynamic with the reality. And yeah, being like a parent, like that forces me to not be so rigid, because that's just setting up for failure. And so I started, in the past 24 hours, I've applied it to my life, and just had me just really thinking about that. And I think being a business owner, being a fashion business owner, you're going to have delays. It's all this stuff, and changing how we feel about these things, because we can't change everything that happens, is probably maybe a way that I've found the ability to sustain sometimes, and not, I don't know. How does it affect your mood and your approach?
Affecting my mood is one thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's only so much we can do.
Like I said, I'm an emo person. But yeah, I think, like you said, Lola, that's like so spot on. You know, being nimble, I think being flexible is a huge part of like both being a parent and being a business owner. I think the nimbleness of our business is so important to keeping us growing and evolving and making changes as we see fit. And I think also defining like what work hours, what work kind of looks like in a day for us also has like shifted. For like me, for example, because of my kid's schedule, I pretty much work from like 10 to 2. And then I log back in sometimes at 8 o'clock and I work till midnight. But like for 6 hours, I'm like offline for the most part. But it's like accepting all of the realities of what I'm living with now and the circumstances or constraints rather that I have, and being creative with that.
Yeah.
In the years that you were working with all these other people, you know, speaking of control, like sometimes the environment within which we work and within which we create is also out of our control when it's, you know, shaped by someone else. So, you know, you've mentioned feeling your input was truly valued at Tanya Taylor's. What role does validation play in being able to connect our craft to our identities? And can those like external gestures of belonging help us to find belonging in ourselves?
I don't think belonging can come from external affirmations as much as from coming from within. Throughout my career, I've always been an outsider. I've always felt like an outsider in the industry because I've always been a minority within the settings that I've been in. Either one of very few people of color, or the only Muslim, or the only South Asian, or, you know, like within that kind of like minority. I was always looking for belonging in an industry, and I realized that it's not going to come from them. It's not going to come from them. I don't need to be accepted by the industry. And that honestly, like even starting this brand, I really wanted to be accepted, but I realized that I don't give a fuck. I don't care as much as I thought I did. And it liberates me. It frees me from what will they think, you know, that kind of mentality. And I think really looking inward at what my POV is, what I have to say. And I feel like I have a lot to say, a lot of things that haven't been said, and especially in an industry here that has so much going on, and it's been upheld by old systems, old traditional systems that don't necessarily work. That sort of gatekeeping, I just don't want to participate in that. And so if I'm never invited to that, it's okay. Not to say that being featured in Vogue isn't like, I mean, I was in Vogue and the New York Times like for my first collection, and that was incredible. And I realized after that, I was like, well, that didn't change anything about myself, right? And so I think for a lot of designers who are seeking that, like those press, you know, features and this and that, you know, I can say like after having gone through that, I'm still trying to make my business work, you know? And so it all comes back to me and me feeling good in my own skin, because I have to live with myself, right? Belonging can't come from outside factors. Even within like my own community of like South Asian or Muslim communities that I are affiliated with, I don't necessarily feel like I belong to them either. So yeah, I feel like that's kind of how I feel about the belonging piece.
I think that's a lesson that we've all had to learn, of like seeking external validation and realizing that it starts within. I will say, and this is, I'm going to push you a little bit, because I think you do help other people to find belonging in themselves. So I think, to your point, we can't wait for other people to validate us. I do think one of the few forms of external validation that might work is seeing other people find belonging in themselves. I think seeing other people do that work inspires us to figure out how to do it for ourselves. Similar to what Lola was saying earlier, external validation also needs a rebrand, where it's like, we can't wait for people to make us feel like we belong in our bodies, but we can
other people
show
it's
other
possible.
People it's possible. Yes.
Yeah, I think to your point, connection and belonging are intertwined.
Yes.
And so I think through finding connection, it will also then fuel this journey of ours of finding belonging.
Yeah.
And I think through the stories that we tell through the other, it helps to bridge connection between people to then for them to feel that validation and their sense of belonging from within.
Wait, I love that. Where you often find, like, where do I belong? Where do I belong? Where do you connect? And then you'll find your own sense of belonging. Nyla, Frankie.
We did it.
We did it.
Well done.
Well done. Okay, going back to our theme, origin. and the origination of something. And it has me thinking about some of the techniques you use. And you work with a family that has been doing it from Jaipur. They've been making tie-dye techniques for over 150 years, Liharia technique. And talking about traditions that do serve us, that you have said that the color reads so differently when it's done with a dye than a print. And like, why is that? Say more.
I am like a really big nerd when it comes to technique and craft, like super nerdy.
It shows.
She's an emo nerd, everyone.
Yeah, we love. Where were you in high school? We would have been friends.
Yeah.
Super emo nerd.
Long sleeve white shirt underneath a t-shirt.
I was definitely wearing like little like kilt mini skirts over jeans.
Yeah.
And I was like in like the art wing of my high school with my emo art kit. Like, yeah. Definitely a nerd for craft and technique. I am a maker. I feel like, yes, I'm a designer, but I'm a maker. I love to make things with my hands. So when I started going kind of deep into techniques and craft, I came across this family based in Jaipur, India, which is in the province of Rajasthan. And they've been doing this craft, this type of tie-dye called Liharia for 150 years, as you said. And when I stumbled upon it, I was like, oh my God, like the emotional resonance that I had to it was very extreme, because the colors just, you can get these really rich, vibrant hues. The vibrancy of the tie-dye techniques are just, you can't get that in prints. And we do offer printed pieces as well, but I love the fact that multiple hands, multiple people made this fabric, from the weaving to the tying of the fabric to the resist dyeing of the fabric to then opening of the fabric to then cutting and sewing it into a garment. I feel more connected to the people, the craftspeople who've made this piece by having it on my body. And, you know, it brings me that connection to their story and their heritage, their lineage. Like the owner, he's, you know, probably like 5th generation carrying this tradition on, and he needs to keep this trade alive, otherwise this craft dies. And so he's trying to find ways to, you know, work with other designers and makers and brands to kind of revive this technique and art. And I was so excited to like work with him on it, and he was just blown away with what we could do with it. That just felt so different to what he's seen before, which is traditionally made in saris.
Season 1, we had
heritage.
We had heritage, and the whole theme was about honoring tradition while also bringing the elements with us that serve us today and support us today, and what we would leave behind. And, you know, we've talked a lot about that. The fashion industry has a lot of traditions and we kind of want to leave behind, but then also there's other traditions and techniques, or, you know, just all these other aspects that we're like, oh shit, we got to preserve this, otherwise it'll be gone. And I think this is a nice juxtaposition of that.
It definitely is. Oh, love the connection.
And belonging.
And belonging, yes. Being Pakistani and white, you've talked about code switching. As this almost like cousin of code flexing, what does that mean to you, and how does that show up in your pieces?
Code flexing is like the opposite of code switching. So they're not cousins. They're cousins that don't talk anymore.
They're cousins that do not talk.
Distant cousins.
Yeah.
On your mother's uncle's side.
Yeah.
Twice removed.
Through marriage.
For a lot of folks who are minorities in spaces that they work or just exist in, they think about like, how am I going to present myself? Even if it's like you're a woman walking into a room full of men, or, you know, and I feel like this type of situation can exist for so many different types of folks. And for myself, in a more cultural standpoint, I felt like the spaces that I would walk into, whether it's a predominantly South Asian space or predominantly white American space or predominantly male space or whatever, like I felt like I would have to kind of like adjust myself to then conform to the spaces that exist, which is code switching, right? You're like turning off certain parts of yourself or toning it down to make other people comfortable, right? Versus code flexing is really owning who you are and coming forth into the space that you exist as fully who you want to present. So like you want to emphasize certain parts of your identity it's on your terms versus for the comfort of others.
Well, because code switching, it's not something we go in saying, I'm going to code switch. A lot of times you go in to a situation and people are protecting themselves.
Yeah.
And so the suppression almost it's instinctual. Sometimes people even leave the environment. They're like, who was that?
Yeah.
Right.
But code flexing feels like you're building towards something, and you can go into situations more prepared.
Yeah, I think it is like unapologetically coming into a space on your terms and really just embodying who you are and not dialing down for others' comforts. And I think that's the key thing that I feel like we innately do when we walk into spaces is, okay, how are they going to feel if I am bringing forth like a very strong POV or being very straightforward or being blunt about certain things, or, you know, coming forth with like my culture or who I am as a person and not dimming that down. And I think through time and maturity, like, you know, going back to the beginning, you know, with your first question, it's like that took time and maturity too, is like being comfortable with who I am. And also I'm evolving, like we all are, we're humans. And so we will evolve. The way that we see ourselves will evolve. The way we want to present ourselves will evolve. And that's natural and that's okay. And I think, you know, for myself, like some days I want to emphasize my South Asian heritage and I want to wear a kurta with jeans. I want to wear something that feels like I'm flexing that part of my style and my identity, like through style. And so that, I think it really brings, you know, full circle, like what I'm trying to do with the other is through that style, through personal style, everyone can kind of, you know, style the pieces that I design into a way that works for them, that speaks to them and is unique to their personal style and their identity.
What I hear you saying is like, we are not halves of a whole. We are not little pieces that come together. We're all these things all the time. And by code flexing, we can be that. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And also it goes back to connection, because sometimes you're going to flex aspects of yourself that allow you to more deeply connect with people who share those qualities. And so thinking of it as less like I'm going through modes and more like this is what's going to enable me to build a community.
Thank you so much, Nyla.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nyla.
Bye, everybody. Hey, everybody. Lola here. Thanks for listening. Style as Identity is part of the Majority Group, which is focused on spotlighting and supporting the brands that make us feel seen. In addition to this podcast, we offer business and strategy advice to brands, have an investment arm, and more. Basically, we want to see you win and do what we can to make it happen. For more info on us, head to themajoritygroup.com. Love ya.